try to leave a record for why I got into drugs when I was 18 to 25 and hooked on heroin for 5 years. Um, no, I was never a bad guy. It was self-inflicted um, violence. I never hurt anybody. I never stole. I ripped a few people off here and there for little amounts of pot and this and that, but I wasn't a bad guy. But I went deep into first psychedelics and then heroin for years, and I was on methadone on and off trying to kick for 4 years. Most people in my spot didn't make it out. It was literally like 1 in 100 junkies that came out of that, and I knew many of them that didn't and went to jail and other horrible things. Really close friends. So my life was very fragmented. I was abandoned by my real father, never met him, and my mother was trying to raise me and my sister, and she resented me because she was trying to get back together with him after she had my sister, and like, I don't know, 4 months after she had my sister, and she was trying to get back together with him, and they made love, and she got pregnant, and she never saw him again after that, and so she resented me. And there were a lot of things in my life, including my name, Lynn, Lynn. I've never been called that. She called me Buddy from the time I was everybody. I've never been called anything other than Buddy. I didn't even know Lynn was my name till I was like in the 3rd grade, and I'm exaggerating, but she never. I asked my sister this. I'm 76, and I asked my sister this recently. I said, "Did you ever hear Maxine call me by my first name, Lynn?" And she said, "Never. It never crossed her lips." I challenge you to think of another human being in history, in literature, in history, that has never been called by his first name, by mother. And so she resented me, and she was narcissistic, and it was nothing brutal. It was just cold, and I just never felt any real love there. And my stepfather, they married when I was 5 or 6, and he terrified me. He never touched me, never once raised a finger to me. I don't even think a harsh word. But he was as scared of me as I was of him, and he came from a whole different generation. He was almost the same way with his own 2 boys. I have 2 stepbrothers. He was pretty cold to them, but they at least knew on some level that he loved them. I never knew that. And so I pretty much hated him and was terrified of him my whole life until I resolved my own issues. Eventually, I self-psychoanalyzed and got rid of my addictions and forgave everybody in my life, my real father and my stepfather, Dutch. And when I was 25, he became my best friend until he died 30, 40 years later. I loved him. He didn't know anymore how to deal with a stepson. He didn't even know how to deal with his own sons. He was cold with them too. But so anyway, he was military. My mother is the classic. If you've ever seen a movie called An Officer and a Gentleman, and I think it's Deborah Winger and Richard Gere, and he's coming into town, going into officer school, and she's a local with another girl, local beauty, and that's their that's their life, is going to the bars and hangouts where these military men going on to be officers, meaning well off, like they didn't have a chance at anything like that in their local little town. They were on the wrong side of it. They were just local girls. They weren't in with the rich people. And so they hung out at these places hoping to hook up with a young, handsome officer and get married and get swept off their feet and go live their dreams. Well, that was my mother. And she did it the first time. She was from Pearsall, south of San Antonio, a little fucking podunk town. And when they moved to San Antonio, I guess she was born in 25, so in like 43, she was 21, 22. She would go to these places, and she met a GI who was going to the war, and they got married, and he was there 2 weeks and gone, and never saw each other again. And my grandparents got that marriage annulled, and then she did the same thing with my real father. He was legitimately, he was a fighter pilot trainer. He was a womanizer, fucking drunk. Well, he wasn't drunk then, but he was drinking. He was just I don't know how to put it, but really handsome. Really, he looked like Tyrone Power. I have pictures, and my mother was fucking gorgeous. She was a knockout, and so she went back to these bars after this guy went overseas and found Coy Glass, my father, and they were perfect for each other. They were both movie star good looks, but this wasn't his first rodeo. He'd been married before, and he was into drinking and partying and womanizing, and so he did that with her. And even though they got married and had my sister, but they had broken up, she tells me, and she went up to see him. He was stationed in Wichita Falls. We're in San Antonio, and she went up to see him thinking they were going to get back together because my sister, their daughter, was 3 or 4 months old, or I don't know, 6 months maybe. We're only 13 months apart, so what's 9 months from 13? So she was only like 3 months. She'd had her sister, and she went up there, and they made love, and evidently while they were there, something happened. Another woman came to his place, and so she left in a huff and didn't know she was pregnant with me, but she was, and it would be pretty much the last time they would see each other. And so she couldn't believe she was pregnant again. She had to move in with her mom and dad, my grandmother and grandpa, Mammy and grandpa, and she had me at Lackland, and he evidently, I didn't know this my whole life, but I saw a letter where he came for my birth. He was there for my birth. He was at the hospital for a couple of days before, and then I think the day after. I was born December 29th, 1948. And then I think the day after, he had to go back to his the station. He was stationed in Wichita Falls. And that was it. That was the last time any of us ever saw him. And so she was resentful as hell. She was narcissistic, immature. She was a brat. She didn't know nothing about taking care of kids. So she moved in with Mammy and Grandpa, and they raised me and my sister. Oh, she was there. The 3 of us slept in one room, and Mammy and Grandpa in the other. It was a 2-bedroom little house on Elena Claire off Nightwood. And but she worked. She was an operator downtown, and her and her friend, this other gorgeous woman, same deal. Were going out at night to these bars where all the service guys hung out looking for a husband. And in the meantime, for the next 4 or 5 years, until I was like 5, my grandma was my mom, and she loved me. I was her favorite, and everybody in her family knew it. Both her daughters and all my cousins. And what I've come to realize is that my grandmother saw. I was the only boy. Mammy she had 2 daughters with her husband Joel Youngblood, and my grandmother was Ethel Evans, Jenny Ethel Evans, or Forster. I'm sorry, Jenny Ethel Forster. And then when she was from Pearsall, when she was like, I guess 18, she married Joel Youngblood, and they had 2 daughters, 7 years apart. And then he got taken in the Spanish flu of 2018, and so she's raising 2 daughters. And when my grandpa, who was a local boy, Virgil Evans, James Virgil Evans, he was just in love with her. He was 21, she was 35, with a 14-year-old and a 7-year-old, but he was in love. And they got married and had my mom. And so my grandmother had two daughters by one husband and another daughter by another husband, and all the daughters had 2 daughters each, except my mother, who had a daughter, my sister, a year older than me. And she knew how petulant Maxine was, and I think she understood that Maxine was very resentful of me, and it was nothing overt. She didn't push me away, but we were just never close. It was always cold, and I always scratched my head from the time I was little alive. She was so distant, but and then I didn't realize until my 60s, 70s that it was that. She named me, I think, Lynn, to like punish him. And I asked her my whole life, why a girl's name, Lynn, Lynn? And she never had it. She would just kind of brush me like, it was no family. A million times I asked, was it a family member? Was it if somebody knew? She never met a man named Lynn. No one had. I've since met a few, but it was a form of punishment, and I'm not even sure she was conscious of it. But she was, I think, punishing him. Anyway, my grandmother saw what was going on there, and I think that's why she took me under her wing, and I became her favorite. And I'm not saying she told everybody, it was just evident. I will not tolerate a parent who has a favorite. I had a ex-wife, my second wife, who was that way with one of her boys and the rest of our kids, and I wouldn't tolerate it. And her oldest boy, the one that wasn't the favorite, appreciates that. And so did the younger one, who was the favorite. He told me many years later that basically that's why he stopped talking to his mother in high school. He realized because she was pathological about favoritism, and it was just ugly to everybody around. And both her boys recognized it and appreciated what I did but I was in that boat. Anyway, long story short, Maxine was living with her parents in this little 2-bedroom place on the south side, and working as an operator with 2 kids in the same room with her, and going out at night to these bars where all the service guys hang out. This would be the 3rd husband she's looking for. And she meets Dutch, and me and Cindy at home, our mom and dad was our grandparents. That they were the ones that were there all day, every day, and disciplined, did everything. My mother was more like an older sister. She would come in and after work and get dressed and go out, and it was very glamorous, and she was a knockout. But so she was doing this, and this was like 5 years after I was born in 48, so this was about 55, maybe 56. She met Dutch, Clifton Cleo Schofield, and they are roughly the same age. I think he's a couple years older. Not the kind of guy she had been looking for. Not a movie star like Coy, my dad, or her first husband, because we have pictures of him. They were relatively handsome. My dad was literally a movie star. I'll post pictures, but he was a gorgeous man, and so that's what she was looking for. You know, some glamorous officer. He was a warrant officer, training as a pilot trainer, and so she meets Dutch, who's an enlisted man, like a sergeant, and not, I wouldn't even say average good looks. He was, and I hate to say, just not handsome in that sense, right? But a pretty much normal guy. And they met at a bar. And obviously, I don't know what the conversation were, but I'm sure she shared that she had 2 kids and living with her parents. He had 2 kids, almost the same age. Daryl was 6 months younger than me, and my older brother was like 5 years older. And but they had been living with their mother's parents, so their grandparents, because his wife had died when Daryl was about a year old of, I want to say, scarlet fever, something like that, and they were stationed in Hawaii. He's in the Air Force, and his wife died, young wife died. He can't take care of kids, so he took them back to Tulsa and left them with the grandparents, and he would try to come, you know, on holidays, wherever he was, maybe it was all over the world, and so it was very difficult. He rarely saw them, but they both realized, without using these words nowadays, it could be very convenient for if they got together and pulled their kids out of these grandparents' houses and started their own life. And that's what they did. So we may have met Dutch once or twice, and before I know it, 2 months later, they're married, and all of us are uprooted. Both his kids from Tulsa didn't know him from Adam, and me and my sister, I mean, not only did they not, I knew at least my mother. I didn't know him. I was scared of him. But these 2 kids didn't know my mother or him. They saw him once a year on holidays. They didn't, especially the young one, Daryl. I remember they drove up to Tulsa from San Antonio to get them, and it took days. And I remember at midnight, it must have been midnight, and I'm sitting at Mammy's kitchen table in my grandpa's lap, which was my favorite safe place in the world. I was sitting in his lap. He's drinking coffee, because they were supposed to be there sometime that night, and it was like midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning when they pulled up out on the curb, and me and Grandpa would go out there. And man, this is back in the day when Tulsa to San Antonio was a fucking 36-hour trip on little roads, and I mean, I don't know what but it took forever. And it turns out, I see Dennis get out, and I don't remember what was said, but I know that Daryl had been crying the whole time, like 30 hours, maybe more. He was in the back seat, just terrified, and wouldn't come out of the back seat, and been crying for 36 hours. And me and Grandpa are standing at the curb with the door open on the passenger side, and we're looking in, and we look back there, and I guess the light comes on, and it was a shocking, I will never forget it, because Darren, had a skin that was 100% freckles. I mean, the most freckles you've ever seen. It was not your normal freckles. And so he's already red, and his eyes and nose and mouth are just swollen and red, and he's crying. Me and Grandpa were like, what the fuck is that? Anyway, they got him out, and we ended up moving into a house a couple of blocks from them, from my grandmother, and it's a house of 6 people that my parents don't know each other. They've been dating a couple of months. Dutch doesn't know anyone in the house. Maxine and me and sister know each other, although we're not used to her as my mother. And I mean, my grandma was my mother. It's like we're all living with my older sister, and it was the weirdest fucking thing you ever saw in your life. Awkward, stilted, very little communication, and it stayed that way for the next, I don't know how long we were, 10, 15 years. Stayed that way till I left, and at 18 or 19 or whatever it was, it never got any better, and only worse in a lot of ways. But because Dutch was military, we moved literally every year. I have the report cards right here. Maxine saved them. I have 12 different report cards. I went to 12 schools from 55 to 68. 12 schools. Complete starting over every year, where you never see anyone in your whole life. Imagine all the people you know in your life. You never see any one of them again except your immediate family. Your brother, sisters, and mom and dad. That's it. And you're in a new place. It's all new friends, all new teachers, all new schools, all new churches, all new merchants, neighbors, everything new. And then the next year that happens again. And the 2nd grade again. And the 3rd grade. And every year, I went from finally knowing people to not knowing a soul. It was unbelievably fragmented. And I mean, more than even most military brats. Most of them will tell you, yeah, we were in Germany for 4 years and this and that. We were never anywhere 4 years. We may have been in the same house. We were in the same house a couple of times for 2 different school years, but it was 2 different schools. It was kind of a nightmare, man. But I was always gregarious. I could always meet people easily. My little brother, Daryl, never met a soul, never had a friend his whole life. He was very cantankerous. I'm going to say perhaps even, I didn't know nothing about this then, but maybe on the spectrum somehow, because and my sister is that way too. Very sort of antisocial, not blatantly so, but a strain of that. Never had a lot of friends, close friends. So I always met people easily, but if you're the new kid every single year at a new school, it ain't like you make friends overnight. I made friends easily, but it would take 6 months or more to become good friends with somebody and know somebody. And then there was a couple of months of that, and I'm gone again. So I was the new kid every year for 12 years. Imagine that. Everybody in the school, like, has their cliques. So I was, in a way, I think a little naive, and I almost want to say sheltered in a way, because, we were completely isolated. For the ninth and 10th grade, or 8th and ninth grade, we moved to Okinawa. There's nothing on Okinawa. There's no fast food. There's no, in the 1960s, there's no anything off base. There was nothing like America. Movies and downtowns, it wasn't like that. And then, after 2 years there, we moved to northern Maine, Limestone Air Force Base Loring Air Force Base in Limestone, Maine. Tiny little town up there. No fast food place, no drive-in, nothing. No new cars, no downtown, no nothing. And so I was there for 9th and 10th grade, second, 9th grade, and 10th grade. Then finally we moved to San Antonio. When he retired, my hometown is where I was born, and I went to Highlands for 2 years before I quit. But even then, I was the new first year. You're always a new kid. Nobody knows you. I was alone a lot, man. And then I'm going to pick this up in a bit.